Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment Minister, Dr. Dion George, has outlined his priorities for the year. Dr. George has promised to consult widely on 2025 decarbonisation pledge. He says he'll be focusing on implementing ambitious actions. One of the key focus areas will be the country's just energy transition towards a low-carbon economy. Now, the implementation of this plan includes actions around electricity, electric vehicles and green hydrogen and other green products. He says his department plans to accelerate investment in renewable energy projects. The Minister now joins us to outline some of his priorities. Minister, so lovely to have you. Welcome to the programme.
Good morning, Leanne. Good morning to all the viewers.
Yeah, certainly ambitious plans. This is it's a very big portfolio. It really is. And I suppose it's quite difficult for you coming into it with no necessary background in environmental governance. So perhaps you want to start with sharing how you're going to ensure that the environment is protected, it's not harmful to human health and well-being, and most importantly, it's free of pollution and ecological degradation.
Well, yes, indeed, as you say, it is a very, very large department. It covers a lot of areas. So it's obviously the environment, but also it's forestries and fisheries. So we're very much environmental, and of course, we make a big impact on the economy. I think there are pros and cons to my not having much experience in this particular field. I think the enormous advantage is that I come with the fresh ideas and are also asking a lot of questions that perhaps haven't been asked before. So I think that's a very good thing. Obviously, the disadvantage is that there's a lot of technical things that I need to wrap my mind around, but I'm doing that quite rapidly, I believe. As you were mentioning about the Climate Change Act, now that is a massive, massive change to our economy. What that requires is that my department and me, we must set sector emission targets for all of the sectors in South Africa. And that's basically towards reducing harmful emissions, because we know climate change is a major problem across the world and also in South Africa. And as also you mentioned, is that we need to accelerate our just energy transition. And that's basically moving away from the fossil fuels and coal fired power stations, for example, and having greener energies. Now, that's not the easiest thing to do, because obviously there are a lot of people working in the industry. We've got a lot of coal in the ground. And so that transition requires quite a nuanced model of moving along. There was a previous decommission at Komati, and that did not go well. So there's been a lot of lessons learned. So my focus really is to work very closely also with the Minister of Electricity and Energy, because his responsibility is basically to get these projects going. My responsibility is to ensure that the environment is protected effectively, and also to make sure that as Eskom manages its emissions better and then decommissions power stations over time, that we do that in a sensible way. Yeah. So that's obviously a very large thing that I'm focusing on.
It's a massive task, and I mean, particularly when you talk about this just energy transition. I know in your opening address, when you were outlining some of your plans and goals. Now, obviously, one of the examples you gave was the province of Mpumalanga, and you know, the reality is that so many jobs are on the line through this just energy transition, because the training in terms of how to work in these kinds of fields has perhaps been missing, and it's something that needs to be implemented in order to create jobs, because at this point there is just job shedding as opposed to anything else. So this is a very difficult avenue to take, where you need to ensure that there is this just energy transition, but at the same time to try and maintain the focus on keeping jobs and even creating jobs. How do you plan on doing that?
Well, absolutely. I have come up with my KISS project, which is basically Kruger, Kirstenbosch, Isimangaliso Icon Status Strategy. And basically what that is to encourage more people into conservation and greener economy activities. So, for example, in Mpumalanga and all along the Kruger National Park border, for example, you have communities that are not necessarily benefiting enough from our natural assets. So what I want to do is I want to start at the basic level. For example, at schools, we need it in the curriculum, teaching our children about conservation, about climate change, about the greener economy, so that we enthuse people into those types of jobs as we grow the economy in that way. We can do that. We are sitting on massive natural assets, which we aren't necessarily leveraging well enough. So that's the one massive possibility that we have in terms of our green economy. Green is the new gold. And basically, if we can transition people into careers that focus on that, I think we can get something going really, really well. We've also got, for example, industries in South Africa that need to change, frankly. Like, for example, one of the biggest things that I'm also focusing on in the large portfolio is conservation. Now, for example, we have a captured lion industry that we're transitioning away from. And so we need to look at how we leverage people who are currently working in those environments into more conservation types of environments. I'm having discussions with a number of people in terms of making sure that we can attract enough money into conservation, for example, donor income, etc. So that's another big thing. So as we transition our economy away from coal, we need to get our people to love our natural assets, to protect them rather than harm them, and then create a whole new industry. There is no reason why the entire world should not be coming to look at our natural assets, such as Kruger and Kirstenbosch and Isimangaliso and everything that comes below that in a way, because we've got the iconic species, we've got plant life that exists nowhere else on the planet, and we have massive marine resources. So I'm looking at the model of how you take the natural assets, leverage them sustainably to create economic growth that delivers jobs. It is possible, but as I say, I'm working very closely with the Minister of Energy and Electricity, and also, of course, with the Minister of Minerals, because that's quite a large transition as well.
Yeah, indeed. And
so
obviously
that's going very well.
Those partnerships are very crucial and critical in the success of your plans. So the relationships need to be strong in order to achieve this. But I suppose many people ask the question as well, why is it critical that South Africa begins to move away from this entrenched coal-driven energy supply and embraces other forms of energy, particularly renewables? You know, a lot of South Africans are more desperate for jobs. They're desperate for other industries where, at the end of the day, this is definitely a much more expensive way of producing energy. And I know that it is all about saving the planet, and I know that there's this whole just energy transition that we need to achieve. But at the same time, it's the expense and the price tag that comes with it that is a great worry. And it also, of course, is that climate change response fund that I know you're hoping to finalize before the end of the financial year. Perhaps you want to talk about the cost of all of this and how it is weighing on South Africans.
It is a very expensive exercise. We are looking at trillions of dollars to transition our own economy. Now, of course, it's imperative because climate change is an existential crisis for the world. I was in China recently in Wuhan for the 8th Ministerial on Climate Action, where I met my counterparts from across the world, and we had the opportunity to discuss the impact of climate change. There are islands, for example, in the Pacific that are going to have to evacuate in our lifetime if the planet continues to heat up as it is, because the sea level is rising. It also has massive implications for Antarctica, because as it heats up, I mean, we know it's under a special agreement. However, there may well be a scramble for Antarctica. What does that then mean to the biodiversity, etc.? So there are many complexities that are coming to the fore. So it's an imperative that we do cut down emissions so that we can prevent the world from heating up too fast, because the idea is that it shouldn't go over 1.5 degrees Celsius. But that's very difficult to do. So the imperative is there. We know that the impact also, not only internationally, is also local. For example, if you look at the storms we had in the Western Cape, the terrible storms in KwaZulu-Natal, the damage to the infrastructure, also Eastern Cape, and also we're a very water-scarce country. And as the climate is changing, South Africa's getting drier. And that means that we're going to have more difficulty then in our economy if we're not able to actually leap over these things as we go. So what is very good is that South Africa is a very sensible participant in the climate action across the world. As I mentioned, I was in China recently. We had discussions. We're having many later on in this year. We also got COP later on in Baku in November. So the whole world is basically quite intensely focused on getting this transition done. Yeah. Because if we don't, and we have got the impact of climate change, what does it do to humankind? I mean, it isn't looking good if you look at the projections. So as a member of the international community and a very important player in that, because South Africa basically forms a bridge, because we're friends with everybody and we're a non-aligned country. So we're able to communicate with everybody across the world, west, east, north, south, and that puts us in a very strategic position. And what we do there is basically make sure that we can have a sensible conversation. Obviously, we're an African country. We are developing. And the Paris Agreement did say that the developed countries were going to pay for this transition. Of course, they also have complexities in their economy. But also, Europe is going to impose a CBAM, which is a carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is basically a tax on our exports if we are over emitting, and that's going to hurt our economy. So I have made it very clear that we are displeased on this. I mean, obviously we move as fast as we can, but to impose additional taxes is actually not in our best interests, because if we're going to be quite straightforward about it, there's choices to be made. Who will feed our hungry children if our economy isn't growing and we're unable to produce? So we have to make sure that our transition is sensible. There's absolute political will to do it. We're all committed. The GNU is absolutely united on we need to accelerate this transition. And at the same time, we need to take our people with us, because if we leave the people behind, we're going to have even more poverty, unemployment and inequality in our country, and we don't want that. So that's why I'm very much focused on working on generating more jobs in the green economy, especially in conservation, etc., because we've got massive assets. We also know we're battling with things like poaching, for example, on our rhino, and we have some misuse of our wildlife. Okay. And that is something that I obviously will address as the Minister for the Environment. We've also got massive problem on Marion Island with mice that are eating the birds. It is a horror story. And we are working on a project so that we can have a mouse-free Marion Island. Of course, that costs a lot of money. So I'm engaging also with the United Nations on a number of projects, especially on the lions, on Marion Island. And also, we need to make sure that we maintain our enormous assets in our parks better, because obviously if you don't maintain your assets, then people won't come, and then you don't make money, and then it's an unvirtuous cycle. Indeed. So what I'm trying to do is to improve those things, but it's going well so far, and I'm sure we'll speak again.
Indeed we will, and as I say, there's lots on your plate. I mean, there's the whole captive lion breeding industry, where you're not supporting the sale of lion breeds, which is lion bones, which is a massive issue. Rhino poaching is another big issue that hopefully we'll get to speak to you about. The one thing I do want to have a touch on is the whole issue around the Turkish power ships, because the minister has said this is basically dead in the water. However, you've come in now and dismissed an appeal by 2 environmental justice groups and ruled in favour of the car power ship proposal for Richards Bay Harbour. Perhaps you want to give us a little bit of understanding as to what's going on here.
This is still a live appeal, and there is still a process that is happening. So I'm not going to go into detail on it now. At the appropriate time, I will speak more on it and go into further detail. Having said that, I think my decision points to a number of things that are very important. We must make sure that we follow the law properly, effectively, etc., and that we have got rules and regulations that must be applied. So that is obviously the frame within which decisions are taken, etc. But I won't go into detail on that. What it also says, my decision, is that I made my decision independently, because I'm the appeal authority for the environmental impacts and also for the Department of Minerals when they want to do exploration, etc. So what happens is there are applications, decisions are made, someone might appeal, and then I consider it and make a decision. What is also very important is that it is very clear that I've made an independent decision, because I know that there are political parties out there, including my own, that do not support car power ships. But what is very clear and important to remember is there's a separation between party and state, and that obviously my party does not issue orders from Nkululeko House. We have been quite critical on other parties who have possibly done that. So we are very clear about the separation between party and state, and I think that's very important. So I think also there's other possibly other applications coming through the process. So as I say, I won't go into the detail on it, but at the appropriate time, I certainly shall.
Okay. Minister,
but I do think that sends a good signal in my view.
Okay, good. I'm happy to hear that. I know I'm meant to wrap, but I was just trying to get my producer's attention to get this question in, because it is something we're covering in the news and it's vitally important to get your reaction to it. Obviously, small-scale fishers are very unhappy over the department's boat allocations. And of course, it's threatening to take you to court over a number of the boats that have been allocated for line fishing. Very quickly, how are you planning to deal with the grievances?
Well, it's a very complex matter, as you know. Our fish stocks are being depleted. The ocean is heating up. But very importantly is that we have an issue with the penguins that are highly endangered and are on the verge of extinction. So what I need to do is to make sure that we allocate our fish stock in the most effective way. That's also a live court case, so I won't talk about that either. But it is complex and it does require a very fine balance. But there are a number of matters that are in court at the moment.
Okay. All right. Minister, thank you. Thanks. We'll leave it there. A good time to end. We're losing your connectivity as well. But that, of course, was Dr. Dion George. He's the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, outlining his plans for the department.